What's up, Internet? So a gun we've had a lot of interest in is the Umarex MP5 by VFC. So in this video, we're starting with a complete AEG. We're going to break it down and convert it to an F2 system. So we're going to go step by step and kind of show you along the way what to watch out for and what you should do. All right, so first off, the gun uses a version 2 Avalon gearbox. So we're going to start with a V2 M4 kit. The only thing you have to change is nozzle length, since the M4 nozzle does not work in the MP5, at least this one. All right, so first off, we're going to swap the nozzle out and prep the system. So to do that, we're going to take our F2, just unscrew the front cylinder. All right, there's your nozzle. All right, I'm going to take our number 11 nozzle, get that ready. So we're going to need to grease it before we install it. All right, so we're just going to grease this part right here and the O-ring. You don't need a lot of grease, but just good visible coating is good. There we go. All right. Don't mess them up. All right, we're going to drop this back in the front cylinder and just screw it back on. All right, it's all ready to go. We're going to get this out of the way and get the gun ready now. All right, so to start, I'm going to take off the front handguard. So push pin on the front. Basically the same thing you do to change the battery since it's a collapsible stock. All right, that's off. Now we're going to take the stock off. Again, another push pin. That slides off. All right, now I'll take separate the upper and lower receivers. Another push pin right here. That. And before we slide off, we have to disconnect our MOSFET and wire harness. It's just blade connectors. They just pull apart. Like that. All right. I'm going to slide this backwards. Now right here, might be a little difficult to separate. You kind of have to like pull down a little bit to pull it away from the selector plate. Let's try putting in some in there. Behave. There we go. A little bit of pain, but just kind of keep working at it and you'll get it out. All right. Now we have to remove this part here. So it's a Phillips head screwdriver. Okay. And then another one down there. All right, there we go. Clear space here. All right, now that's off. I'm going to take the motor out. So we're going to need it's actually a star, or it works, looks like. This looks like a T9 will be the correct size for these guys anyway. T9 Torx. All right. Get these out. Then base plate comes off. I'm not actually going to need these anymore. I'm just going to put these over here. All right, now disconnect the motor. Got two terminals there. A good trick is to take a small flathead, kind of pop underneath there, kind of pop it up that way. That way you're not like yanking on the wire. Get this out of the way. Hey. All right. Got those disconnected. just pull your motor out, like that. All right, now down the bottom, you should have, double check here, make sure I'm not lying. Yeah, 2 Phillips head screwdriver, or Phillips head screws down there. I'm gonna take those out. That's gonna remove the gearbox from the lower receiver. Alright. Unlike other MP5s where you have to take the selectors off, these actually do stay in place, and you just lift the gearbox out. Just have to get the selectors in the right position. Careful, pull your wires through. Make one caught there. Since it's kind of like an L in there, you might have to help it along with a screwdriver to pop through the hole. Like this one that's being a pain. Get through there. There we go. Alright, and the screws are still kind of left in there, still engaged a little bit. It's a little easier than trying to put them back in the hole, so we'll just leave it like that. Alright, have our gearbox out now. Now we have to disassemble the gearbox and get it ready for the F2 to go inside of it. So this is a standard version 2 Avalon gearbox that's used in basically all the new VFCs now. So this can kind of be used for other guns as well, this process. So we'll have to go through this step by step and kind of show you what to do here. So first off, it's a QD spring system. So we actually take the spring out and the system will be no longer under spring tension, makes it easier to take it apart. So for that, I know it's going to be an Allen wrench. Hey, you got a winner. All right, so yeah, okay. Once it's in there, you just push down. It's got 2 tabs right here. So you push down, rotate, and it'll pop out this way. Come on, there we go. Pull the spring out. So there's the tabs, so they lock in like that. All right. Don't need that anymore either. All right, now it's no longer under spring tension. Makes it easier to take this apart. So Phillips head screwdrivers around the perimeter. Generally what I like to do when I take a gearbox apart is kind of start a map of the screws. So I'm going to put this on there. And just kind of keep the same pattern as we take it out. This one above it. So you just kind of make a map like this, that way you can actually match up what screw goes where. Alright, so just going to basically hold down your trigger, hold down the cylinder, and just pop up the back of the gearbox. Like that. Alright, now the first step would be to take out the cylinder assembly here. So there's a little spring, and you pop off the peg right here. This is for the tab plate. So just pop that up. You can pull up the whole cylinder assembly. Alright, and then take your gears out. Right. Just watch out, there are little shims on the gears sometimes. Just keep track of those if they like get loose inside the gearbox. If they happen to rattle around and get on your switchboard, it could possibly bridge a contact and cause a short. So just don't want to have loose metal objects in your gearbox. Alright, get your shims here. likes to stick to the grease. Come here. Doesn't want to leave. Alright. Check the other side real fast here. No shims there. Alright. I'm going to pop our trigger out. So the trigger has a spring on the back side, so you might have to like just pull up and wiggle a bit to get it to unlock. Alright, there's our spring. Okay, now we're going to take out the actual trigger assembly here. So first the spring has to disconnect from the peg. That. And is held in place by this little screw right here. Now we're going to need this screw later, so don't lose it. Oh hey, helps if you use a Phillips head, not a Torx. There we go. Alright, pull up on that. I got a little retaining clip here, pop this out. Okay, now again, you need that little screw, so just kind of dump that out. There you go. Keep track of this one. Don't need this anymore. Okay, spring. Alright, so for version 2, you do not need the cutoff lever. So we're going to pop that out. Just one screw in the center. Actually, before you do that, there's a spring usually. No, there's no spring on this one. Odd. Alright, usually there's a spring right there between those two bridges, but not there. Okay, so go ahead and take this screw out. Alright, cutoff lever. Alright, what do we got here? So there is still a good layer of grease in the gearbox. We want to clean that out because it can cause a short possibly. It can also collect dirt and transfer water and stuff like that. So make sure it's clean. So for that, recommend just wiping out paper towel. Using like rubbing alcohol works really well for getting the grease, cutting the grease. So just kind of get a good dab here. And just clean off the internal surfaces. Especially important where like the trigger is, that's where your switchboard is going to go. So you don't want to grease get on the back side and mess up the contacts or pins. Okay. Looking pretty good here, almost done. Alright, clean of grease. Going next up, we're going to actually check out our selector plate here. So selector plate interfaces with a very small micro switch. This guy right here. So when you drop this in, this micro switch is sticking out and the selector plate runs on top of it to engage your second selector position, basically full auto. So you want to check the selector plate, make sure there's no rough edges on it, because if it goes over top, it comes back forward, it can catch and snag it and break it off. You have to check the clearance, make sure it's not sitting too close to the switch, because if it impacts the side of it, it can also break it off as well. So you have to double check your selector plate, make sure there's no problems with compatibility there. So for that, we are going to take off your selector or safety assembly here. So just one screw in center. Pull it out, and this slides onto the post like that. So it slides right off. You got one spring underneath of it. Then this piece slides right out the back. Kind of did too fast there, but it's like that. That orientation comes right out. All right, now that's out of the way. Selector plate can slide forward or backwards. Maybe we didn't have to take that off. Guess we didn't have to take it off. All right, usually you do. Usually it goes that way, not this way. But hey, we're off now. All right, so basically we're going to check this plate right here. Basically run your fingernail across it, make sure there's no rough edges. If your fingernail like catches on something, you want to take like a file or sandpaper and smooth that off. This one's looking pretty good though. There's no rough edges, nothing's going to catch, so it's nice and smooth. All right, so that's good. So drop this back on. Put this back in, which we didn't need to take off in the first place, but hey, now you know how to do it. All right, hold this in place. And it's oriented like that. So this needs to go around. This hook's underneath of it. And this spring, the end of the spring needs to hook over that lip right there. So you should try and like get started there, and then use this. That's come up a little bit. Like that. So it's hooked under there, pop that back down. That's the way it should be, like that. Put a screw back in. And it should be that it'll still spring back and forth. If it kind of like locks in place, you've got the screw too tight, you want to back it out a little bit, but that's the way it should be, like that. All right. Now the selector plate is all checked out. It's out of the way. We want to actually check clearance with the switchboard. Now, all right, you'll need that little screw we took out earlier from the trigger assembly. So that. All right, so your switchboard is going to drop in place. The gearbox just where the original trigger switch was. Just like that. And you see the screw is going to go right there to secure it. All right, just snug it down. Don't have to like torque it down. You might break the board. Just good and snug. All right, what we're going to check now is the clearance between the micro switch and your selector plate. So it should be this edge of the plate should just glide over top of the switch and not actually hit the gray part, the actual housing. It should only interface with the little spring-loaded fin. It should be. Sometimes we put it into the receiver. It can actually put pressure on the plate and cause it to push down. So just kind of put a little bit of pressure there. Just move it back slowly. All right, it's clearing perfectly fine. It's not catching anything. It's just gliding over top and hitting that fin. So you don't need anything for that. What you can do is if you see that happen, I can demonstrate right here real fast. If you do see that happen, take that off. Go back these little shims you took out. I just need one. Come on. All right. Take a little shim like that. So that's the screw hole that the switchboard secures with. So drop it there. So basically, you put this on, the screw's going to pass through that, hold it in place, and that's going to actually space it away from the side of the gearbox and putting a little more distance between the switch and the selector plate, like that. Now, like I said, we didn't really need to do it on this one, but as you can see now, we got a little bit more clearance between the switch housing and the selector plate. We're actually still engaging the switch, so we're just going to leave that in there anyway, just for a little extra clearance. All right, it's all done, secure, good to go there. Now we can actually drop in our cylinder assembly and button it back up. All right, so we got our F2. Dropped in place. All right, it's feeling decently solid on the pins. We'll check that later to make sure we don't have to shim it. But connect our solenoids. So as you can see, we got 3 headers. This is for your main wire harness, and you got one for your poppet, one for your nozzle. They will be marked. So you got J3 and J2. There's also a P and an N next to them, so poppet and nozzle. So the one marked black is going to be your poppet. It's also going to be the lower solenoid on the F2. So put that into our poppet header. And yes, the angle can be a little weird sometimes. I have to like twist the wire to get the drop in there. It's not cooperating. There we go. Kind of hard when there's a camera in the way. All right, let's push that in. All right. Got our nozzle. Also, this will only go in one way. It's got a little tongue and groove here. So if you try to put it upside down, it won't actually go in. So just keep that in mind. All right, pop that in. And we'll try doing like a little twist here to get these wires kind of cleaned up. All right, looking nice and neat there. All right, now the wire harness. Now on this one we have a collapsible stock, so I think we are going to try running it back through the front as well. We could also go down to the grip if we wanted to. If you're going to do that, you want a shorter harness, like a 7.5 would be fine. You can actually connect it and run it down through there, have your FCU battery in the grip. But this looks like it had pretty clear passage through there, so we're going to try running it through the front. All right, so for that, we're going to plug our harness in and basically flip it back over the top itself. All right, and this is actually the channel for the harness. So we should just be able to flip this over like that. We should have enough clearance there, I think. But you know what? Let's go back a little bit further. This heat shrink right here is kind of thick. Don't want that interfacing with or interfering with the actual switch itself. So I'm going to go like this. We got enough harness here to reach, so we're good. All right, kind of leave that like that. All right, we're going to go ahead and install the trigger here. All right, so we got a trigger spring, a trigger. So it's going to go like this. This little peg goes in this little hole. Just going to click that. All right, so the trick is to get this leg of the spring hooked over this ledge of the gearbox first. Keep pressure against it, that's going to keep the spring from popping out. Just kind of pivot up, drop the spur over the top of the air ledge, and then wiggle it back and forth till you find the hole, and it drops in place, like that. Alright, now one thing to check too. Where's our spring guide at? So on this one, that piece we took off the back actually does interface with the spring guide. It's a little greasy, I'm going to clean that off real fast. Usually you don't have a problem, but you always want to check this, is if the spring guide will actually clear the solenoids. Which in this case, they're not going to. See if when it's locked in place right there, not going to clear. So even if it looks like it's close, one thing to keep in mind too is it might be kind of like drop down this angle when you put it in, but when you put that bolt in the back, it's going to bring it up. That could actually come up underneath the solenoids and break the ends off. So you want to make sure there's actually a clearance between the end of the solenoids and the tip of the spring guide. So this guide we're going to have to shorten. So let's go do that and we'll be right back. Alright, so apparently VFC makes a really good spring guide, but after about 10 minutes in a hacksaw, some sandpaper, we got a nice short spring guide now. So we'll clear the end of the solenoids, like that. Yay! Alright, let's put this thing back together now. Just drop air line down there, kind of hold everything in place. You try kind of up from the bottom to kind of like keep the safety lever pushed up. Make sure the wire harness clears. the idea is it should button up and be, the seam around the two halves should be flush. If you see it's like gapped apart, usually means you're pinching something, so you don't want to actually screw it together at that point because you'll probably damage a wire. But we're good there. We'll put in a couple screws and make sure that the cylinder stays locked in place. All right. These guys in. Right. Check, let's make sure the cylinder doesn't rattle back and forth, which it does a little bit there. So you got some movement. So basically we have to make the holes on the F2 cylinder large enough to accommodate the largest pin of most gearboxes we measured. So the pins on this gearbox are a little bit narrower, and there's not enough, it's not fitting tight enough here to keep the cylinder from moving. So basically we're going to have to take this back off and shim it to make sure that it doesn't move anymore. Okay, pop this back off. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this foil tape, like you'd use for like HVAC applications. It's adhesive, got to peel back, but it's actually metal, so it can be used as a shim. So what we're going to do is cut little strips and put it right on the front of the cylinder. All right. Now we got two equal length strips. All right. Come here. You do need fingernails for this part. There we go. All right. Stick that over right where the hole is. Just note if you have grease on your fingers and you've got grease on the surface, you might have to wipe that off with some alcohol so it'll actually stick correctly. Kind of locked out, we're good. All right, then the other side. Same deal. All right, now what we need to do is cut a vertical slit in that foil, just so it'll slide down on top of the pin correctly. So use a razor blade or a pocket knife, whatever you have handy. Don't cut your finger. Vertical slit. Do the same on the other side. Nope, come up a little bit there. All right. So now when you press it down with the pin, it'll open up inside and you actually shim it to that pin. All right. Good. All right. Now we can button it back up again. Again, no gaps. Good. Okay, put those same screws back in and check, make sure we're not actually moving. Snug it back down. All right. Now we're nice and tight. No movement there at all. Can't go back and forth. It's not moving at all. All right, put the rest of the screws back in, and we should be ready to put it back in the gun. All right, it's all blended back together. The only thing we can do here is just do a functions check. Just kind of hook up our FCU and battery, make sure the trigger is actually interfacing with the micro switch and the selector plate is doing its thing too. So got our battery, FCU. Alright, so you actually see on the FCU what fire mode it's currently in. And we'll go in sleep mode for 5 seconds, so just keep that in mind. But okay, we'll move forward here. So now it's in the safety position, so we are currently showing we're not engaged in selector switch. We move it back over top that switch. So we got auto, shot, auto, shot. So that's working correctly. Alright, so now we just check our trigger here. You can hear the solenoid's firing, and we're working. So everything appears to be good. All right, so now we're good to put it back in the gun, and everything should line up correctly. All right, so we do need the spring guide. So the spring guide is actually what this piece attaches to. This bolt comes through. It's actually going to thread into the spring guide, like so. So make sure that's in there. So usually there's spring tension holding against it, which helps hold it in place. We don't have that right now, so it might be a little trickier. Actually, what we're going to do, screw this in the back of it to give some extra to hold on to. All right. Get this back out, and hopefully that's going to stay in place. If it doesn't, what you can do is just take some super glue, put it in the tracks there, and just glue it in place because it doesn't really need to move anymore. All right. Really hoping that stays. All right. First off, when we clear this off, then we can actually get things reassembled. So let's get this cleaned up out of the way. All right, now we got some elbow room here. We can work around a bit more. We're going to drop the gearbox back into the lower receiver. So again, we got those screws in there, so make sure they don't fall out. And then if you look inside, this is the actual cam on the selector switch that interfaces with your selector plate. So that goes into this bit right here. So looks like the best angle of attack here is somewhere between semi and auto. That way it's got basically facing vertical. Drop the airline down through where the motor would go, or come up through. Right. Drop the trigger through its slot. Might have to fiddle around a bit, but it should drop in place. It'll fit nice and flush. And you actually, when you move the selector, you should see the selector plate move inside. You get the light just right. We're good there. All right. So first thing I'm going to do would be to secure the gearbox by tightening the screws in the grip again. All right, nice and snug down now, so now it's not going anywhere. I'm going to reattach the piece on the back. I don't know what it's called, but I'm just going to put the piece on the back. And again, if that spring guide doesn't want to stay in place, you can glue it in place. Just if you do that, make sure it's just on one side, so otherwise you can't get the gearbox back apart again. So usually best on the glue on the left-hand side, so you open it up away from yourself. But it's staying in place right now, so hopefully it just continues to do that. I'll just try this one first. Hey, look at that. All right. Screw the bottom one again. So now you can see why people usually do glue them in place, but if you've got the right finesse, you can actually get the work. All right, so that's all secure. Good to go there. Now we actually put the upper back on the lower, which might be a little tricky with this wire harness, but we're going to give it a shot here. All right, so if you look, I'll take this out. On the front, if I get the light right, there's two passageways for a harness to go through, the up front here. So we're going to have to pass this harness through one of those slots. Now, it looks like we're biased to the left-hand side of the receiver, so we're going to try passing it through the left-hand side over here. Now, one thing you might find is that when you put the heat shrink on, it can be a little thick. So what you can do is actually kind of like just pinch that a little bit, make it flatten out, make it easier to get through there. So I'm going to pinch it just a slight little bit. Don't have to really crank down on it, just enough to deform the heat shrink. That's a little flatter. All right. What we're going to do first is actually slide this on without the inner barrel in place, check our alignment with the nozzle, in case we have to do any shimming there, but hopefully it's going to line up correctly. All right, so left-hand side, it's going to be really hard to show on camera, but let's see what we can do here. All right, so basically you just look down the end of the receiver, okay, the light just right, just pass it through, then we can get the lower in place. Actually, come that way. All right, get that started. So it looks like put in semi, just kind of pull them apart a little bit to kind of pull that tab up away from the selector plate as much as possible. And don't crush your fingers when you do that. But all right, so it's on there. Put this body pin in. We're actually going to check our alignment now. So nothing connected, can't fire anything like that. Gonna look down the barrel, use a bright flashlight. And what you should be seeing, we can try, see if we can get on camera here, but the nozzle should be symmetrical within the outer barrel. So it should be basically centered like this. If it's like off to left or right or up or down, you might have to add more of that that foil tape to either outside the gearbox or actually shim the cylinder within the gearbox to actually shift it so it's centered. But right now we're looking pretty centered, so I don't think we have to do anything. Yeah, looks pretty good. I'm gonna go for it. And it's usually best to do it without the inner barrel in there because the nozzle has enough movement in the cylinder that if it's a little bit off center, it can just kind of force the nozzle over so it looks centered, but it actually isn't. This way, nothing touching it, so actually see the true form of whether it's centered or not. So, looks pretty good. Pop this back off. All right, go through this again. We actually do this while it's still in there. Slide our inner barrel back in. Can't see. All right. Just make sure the harness is looped over to the left-hand side of the V tube. All right, ready to slide this back together. All right. Make sure that the everything's lined up with the chamber itself. It's not cockeyed or anything. We're all locked in place. Wire harness is tucked up out of the way. And put the pins back in. So center pin. Yep. Don't want to go to its home. All right, it's in there now. Alright, go ahead and put our stock back on, I guess. Slide in place. Real easy. Oh, wrong thing. Wrong way. There we go. Alright, now we have to get the FCU and battery tucked in there nice and neat. So I think what we're going to have to do here, since this can't actually pass through the top, it's too wide, so we're going to have to basically treat this just like a battery pack. So it's going to have to come in like this and then go up. I'm actually going to zip tie this to the wire harness. Just going to tuck it over like this. It also helps as a stress relief, so even as you take it out to unplug the battery or whatever, it's not going to actually put any stress on the harness itself. So it's actually a pretty good idea anyway. But just loop it over like that. And either like kind of torque it in place with like some needle nose pliers, or if you have a fancy zip tie tool, just do that. Alright, now should be connect our battery here. Might actually go like that. Alright, this should work. Alright, so I'm going to drop that in first. Full bare FCU. And there's this little hook back here. That's going to hook onto this lip on the receiver. So got to make sure that the FCU is forward of that, not in between. It's going to get pinched. And just kind of check as you're putting things on, make sure nothing is getting sandwiched. I just need to go back a little bit further. Alright. Pin back in. And we're pretty much good to go. So I guess we should fire a few shots down range, make sure it's working correctly, but that should be it. Alright. Get this hooked up. Alright, we're in business. See if it actually shoots straight. Cool. We're in business. So that's what it takes to convert a Umarex MP5 by VFC. And this will work on either the, obviously the A4 or the A5, the stock doesn't really matter. The one thing to be mindful of is the earlier version of the VFC MP5, which had the 3-round burst. That is a completely different gearbox, so this will not actually transfer over to that. So for that one, that's a completely different animal altogether, which I'm not getting into. But for the standard, Avalon gearbox version 2, the standard semi full auto, this will cover that. Alright, so that covers everything. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure and check out our social media for more tech videos and tutorials. And I kind of like this thing. I'm going to shoot a bit more, but see you later.